Why ownership will matter more than money in the future. Money was never the real game. Ownership was, and the people at the top figured that out long before everyone else did. While most people were taught to chase salaries, save scraps of paper, and trade time for survival, a small group quietly focused on owning the systems themselves, the platforms, the algorithms, the land, the attention, the data. Because once you own the machine, you no longer need permission to make money from it. That's why two people can work equally hard, yet one stays trapped while the other becomes untouchable. The future won't belong to the hardest workers. It'll belong to the owners. Most people still believe wealth is about income. That's the illusion. The real divide in society has never been rich versus poor. It's owners versus users, and the dangerous part is, most people don't even realize which side they're on. Think about the modern world for a second. You wake up and check a phone you don't control, scroll platforms you don't own, consume content pushed by algorithms built by people you'll never meet. You work inside systems designed by corporations, banks, and tech companies that profit from your attention every second you exist inside their ecosystem. You participate, they own. That's the entire game. For decades, society trained people to believe security came from stable employment. Go to school, get qualifications, work hard, stay loyal, retire safely. But something changed quietly, slowly. Then all at once, the internet turned ownership into the ultimate leverage. A single software company can now make more money than entire industrial empires once did. A creator with an audience can out-earn doctors, lawyers, and executives. A person who owns digital infrastructure can generate wealth while sleeping, while millions still trade hours for survival. Because ownership scales, labor doesn't. That's why the wealthiest people on Earth rarely sell time anymore. They own assets, equity, attention, distribution, systems that continue producing value long after the work is finished. Look at the modern elite carefully. Elon Musk didn't become powerful because he worked hourly. He owns companies that shape industries. Mark Zuckerberg owns the platform billions communicate through. Jeff Bezos built infrastructure people depend on daily. Ownership creates gravity. Money simply follows it. And this is where the future becomes uncomfortable for most people. Because technology is eliminating the value of average labor faster than society is willing to admit. Artificial intelligence is replacing repetitive cognitive work. Automation replaced factory labor years ago. Algorithms now outperform entire departments. Even creative industries, once considered safe, are being reshaped by software. But here's what remains protected: the people who own the systems. The AI doesn't threaten the owner of the platform, it threatens the workers inside it. That's the shift nobody prepared the middle class for. For years, people believed high income meant freedom. But income without ownership is fragile. The moment the system changes, the paycheck disappears. The company downsizes. The industry collapses. The algorithm changes direction. And suddenly, a person who looked successful realizes they controlled nothing the entire time. No platform, no audience, no equity, no leverage, just dependence. And dependence is the opposite of power. The future economy is quietly dividing people into two categories: those who own digital real estate and those who rent access to it. Think about creators on social media. Most believe they're building freedom because they have followers. But followers on rented platforms are not ownership. One policy update can erase years of work overnight. The smartest creators understand this. That's why they build email lists, private communities, brands, products, software, media companies. They convert attention into assets they actually control. Because attention without ownership is temporary. Ownership turns temporary attention into permanent leverage. And this principle goes far beyond the internet. The same thing is happening with housing, data, media, finance, education, even identity itself. The people who own the infrastructure of society increasingly dictate the behavior of those who don't. That's why corporations obsess over subscriptions now. Because subscriptions create dependency. They don't want one-time buyers anymore. They want permanent renters, permanent users, permanent reliance. Own nothing, rent everything. That model is becoming the foundation of modern life. And most people are walking directly into it because convenience feels safe in the short term. But convenience has a hidden price control. When you don't own your tools, your platform, your audience, your distribution, your skills, or your assets, someone else controls access to your survival. And once survival depends on permission, freedom becomes an illusion. This is why ownership in the future won't just be financial, it'll be psychological. Because the person who owns their time thinks differently. The person who owns distribution moves differently. The person who owns assets operates without fear, while everyone else stays trapped reacting to systems they never built. And the most dangerous part? Most people won't realize this until it's too late. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid because it sounds too extreme. The future won't punish people for being unintelligent. It'll punish people for remaining dependent. And dependence is seductive because at first it feels comfortable. A guaranteed paycheck feels safe. Monthly subscriptions feel convenient. Algorithms making decisions for you feels efficient. Renting everything feels easier than building anything. But slowly, quietly, that convenience transforms into invisible control. The person who depends on a company for income becomes afraid to speak. The person who depends on a platform becomes afraid of losing reach. The person who owns nothing becomes vulnerable to every economic shift, every policy change, every technological disruption. That's why ownership is becoming psychological warfare. Because the people who own assets sleep differently. They think long-term. They move without desperation. They aren't trapped chasing approval from employers, platforms, or unstable systems. Their leverage protects them from panic. And leverage is the closest thing modern society has to real power. Look carefully at how the world is evolving. The wealthy are buying land while others rent lifestyles. They acquire companies while others collect paychecks. They build audiences while others consume content. They own distribution while others beg for visibility. Even now, the most powerful companies on earth are fighting for one thing above all else: ownership of human attention. Because attention eventually becomes influence, influence becomes control, and control becomes wealth. That's the real reason the internet created a new class of powerful people almost overnight. A teenager with ownership of an audience can now generate more leverage than someone with decades of traditional career experience. A small software founder can influence millions without ever stepping inside a corporate office. One piece of digital infrastructure can produce more wealth than thousands of hours of physical labor. The old world rewarded obedience. The new world rewards ownership. And that shift is making a lot of institutions nervous. Because people who own things become harder to control. A person who owns their audience doesn't fear gatekeepers. A person who owns assets doesn't panic during uncertainty. A person who owns their skills can adapt faster than systems can replace them. That's why the next decade will create two very different types of people: those who spend their lives renting access to everything, and those who quietly position themselves to own pieces of the future, not necessarily massive empires, just leverage, control, assets, distribution, independence, because in the end, money alone was never the real objective. Money can disappear, currencies collapse, markets crash, but ownership keeps producing power long after the noise fades. And once you understand that, you stop asking, how do I make more money? You start asking a far more dangerous question: what can I own that the world will eventually depend on? If this video changed the way you see the future, type ownership is power in the comments, not as motivation, as a decision.